Welcome back to the Dinar Daily, your dedicated source for tracking the most crucial developments shaping Iraq's economic landscape. Today, the financial world is witnessing a seismic shift, marking what many observers consider the most monumental development to emerge from Baghdad in over a decade. An ongoing, long-debated proposal to remove 3 zeros from the face value of the Iraqi dinar has moved decisively from the realm of persistent rumors into official policy planning. This transition is being explicitly confirmed by the Central Bank of Iraq, CBI, whose recent communications have anchored the once speculative concept firmly in public discourse and internal strategy. The significance of this confirmation cannot be overstated, as the central monetary authority of a post-conflict nation is now openly detailing the technical, psychological, and logistical hurdles of an imminent currency redenomination, signaling that the process has indeed entered its crucial, public-facing rollout stage. The gravity of this announcement is amplified by the fact that the CBI has released a formally titled document, deleting 3 zeros from the dinar, citizens' concerns, and experts' warnings, which immediately transforms the conversation. For years, statements on this subject were sporadic and often vague, insufficient to serve as a reliable foundation for financial planning. Now the explicit public acknowledgement that the plan is active forces all participants in the Iraqi economy, from the average citizen to international financial institutions, to treat the redenomination as a forthcoming reality, not just a possibility. Central banks, particularly those overseeing economies in recovery, do not typically initiate broad, national discussions on such sensitive currency matters unless the internal planning is robust, finalized, and execution is nigh. This open dialogue is the necessary precursor to any successful monetary transition, ensuring that the process is transparent and carefully managed to prevent negative fallout. A critical aspect of any successful currency reform is the management of public expectations and anxieties, and the CBI's current approach is a masterful lesson in this regard. The decision to openly address the citizenry's innate concerns, such as the potential for savings devaluation, sudden price spikes, or unfair wage adjustments, demonstrates a high level of institutional awareness. The central bank understands that monetary reform is not merely an arithmetic exercise. It is a profound psychological event that must be absorbed and accepted by the population. Citizens who have lived through periods of hyperinflation or the instability of previous devaluations may instinctively fear any drastic change to their nation's money supply. The public communication strategy, therefore, is designed to methodically build a narrative that frames this redenomination not as a punitive measure, but as an inevitable and beneficial step toward economic normalization and stability, effectively guiding public opinion toward acceptance. The strategy currently being employed by Iraqi financial authorities draws clear parallels with other nations that have successfully navigated the turbulent waters of currency redenomination, such as Turkey and Brazil. In these historical examples, the methodical deployment of public outreach programs was instrumental in paving the way for smooth acceptance and implementation. By gradually introducing the subject into the national conversation, authorities effectively normalized the concept, significantly reducing the risk of a panicked public backlash when the zeros are finally removed. This deliberate and protracted conditioning mechanism ensures that society reacts with informed understanding rather than confusion or a destructive loss of confidence. The goal is a seamless transition where the population is not caught by surprise, as history has repeatedly shown that sudden, unexplained changes in currency policy can trigger capital flight, widespread panic, and systemic financial erosion. Beyond the strategic layer of communication, the core question remains: what is the practical economic consequence of eliminating 3 zeros from the Iraqi dinar? Fundamentally, redenomination is an elaborate bookkeeping adjustment. Its primary technical purpose is to simplify financial transactions, making the handling of large numbers less cumbersome for both retailers and financial institutions. However, for an economy like Iraq's, which has been severely impacted by successive decades of conflict, international sanctions, and subsequent currency instability. This is far more than a technical fix. The reform is intended to serve as a profound psychological milestone, a symbolic act by the government that communicates a clear message of restored normality, renewed economic sovereignty, and a decisive break from the burdensome legacy of financial distress that the current multi-zero banknotes represent. The ripple effects of this reform will inevitably cascade across all sectors of the national economy. Retail businesses will be required to immediately recalibrate all their pricing systems. The entire banking sector will need to adjust its ledgers, contracts, and software systems. And existing legal agreements and contracts must be systematically rewritten to reflect the new unit of account. When executed smoothly and with meticulous precision, these necessary adjustments promise to introduce greater efficiency and operational ease into all financial activities. Furthermore, this change has the potential to significantly reduce the stigma often associated with Iraq's currency, which has historically been perceived in international trade as weak or inconveniently cumbersome due to its high face value denominations, thereby enhancing its appeal and usability on the global stage. The perception of Iraq's economic readiness is a critical factor for international stakeholders, and the dinar reform will be heavily scrutinized. Global investors currently monitoring Iraq's high-potential sectors including energy, infrastructure, and banking will likely interpret the successful implementation of this monetary reform as a powerful indicator of strengthening stability and a firm commitment to engaging with the global economy on a far more resilient and professional footing. Conversely, the policymakers are reminded by expert warnings that while the act of removing zeros carries a significant symbolic power, its ultimate success is entirely contingent on the meticulousness of its execution and the unwavering clarity of the guidance provided. Any mismanagement could inadvertently breed public confusion, erode trust, and undermine the very foundation of confidence the reform is intended to build. A crucial distinction must be drawn when discussing the process of deleting the zeros, as the phrase is open to two fundamentally different interpretations, each with vastly different implications for the currency's value. The first and simplest interpretation is known as a lop or loser pays scenario, which is purely an administrative or cosmetic redenomination without any underlying change in the currency's actual exchange rate or purchasing power. In this case, a high-value note, for instance, a 25,000 dinar banknote, would simply be exchanged for a new 25 dinar note, and all domestic prices, wages, and contracts would scale down in direct proportion. While this simplifies accounting and provides a psychological relief from unwieldy numbers, the purchasing power of the average Iraqi remains precisely the same, offering no new wealth internationally. The second, far more transformative interpretation of the project involves a true revaluation accompanied by redenomination. In this substantive scenario, the currency's actual real-world exchange rate on the international market is first strengthened and significantly increased relative to global benchmarks, such as the US dollar, before the zeros are domestically removed for ease of use. This strategic sequencing results in a new, lower denomination note that not only maintains its domestic purchasing power but has substantially enhanced its worth and prestige on the global stage. Many informed analysts believe that the comprehensive and deliberate nature of the CBI's current reforms and the overall economic context strongly indicate that Iraq is moving toward this latter, more impactful option, aiming for genuine value restoration rather than mere paper cleanup. For international observers, understanding the difference between these two potential outcomes, the administrative lop versus the substantive revaluation, is absolutely paramount. The lop scenario is a form of cosmetic surgery on the currency, making day-to-day use simpler, but it is ultimately neutral in its economic effect. A genuine revaluation, by contrast, reflects a real, fundamental recognition of the Iraqi dinar's increased underlying strength, backed by national wealth and policy relative to global financial standards. When this revaluation is subsequently paired with redenomination, it allows the Iraqi government to issue new banknotes that are smaller in face value but hold a significantly higher worth in real, international terms, potentially restoring the dinar closer to its prestigious value from decades ago. This nuanced distinction explains why the public and expert debate around the deletion of zeros carries so much weight. For the people of Iraq, the eventual outcome will profoundly affect the foundational trust they place in their savings, their pensions, and their future salaries. For foreign investors and currency holders abroad, the decision will determine whether their holdings of the Iraqi dinar represent a speculative investment based on an unsubstantiated hope or a strategic asset based on a recognized, policy-driven increase in international value. The emerging evidence, including the central bank's overall tone, the comprehensive nature of its financial reforms, and the broader economic context, suggests a clear policy intention toward deliberate value restoration. Not just mathematical simplification. Another critical component of Iraq's financial strategy is the deliberate and highly transparent communication campaign being conducted by the Central Bank of Iraq. This is not a process being carried out behind closed doors or in secrecy. Quite the opposite is true. The CBI has been systematically transparent, issuing repeated public statements and articles detailing the policy shifts, various reforms, and the meticulous preparatory steps being taken for the upcoming monetary transition. This pattern of open communication functions as a sophisticated preemptive conditioning mechanism, consciously designed to bring both the general citizenry and the global financial markets along on the comprehensive economic journey, ensuring everyone is prepared for the inevitable change. Governments, with mature economic foresight, fully understand that a sudden, unexplained announcement concerning a major monetary reform will invariably trigger confusion, distrust, and in some cases outright financial panic. The alternative, and the approach Iraq is now employing, is the calculated use of gradual, repetitive, and reassuring messaging to prepare the entire population mentally, logistically, and emotionally for the imminent change. This includes daily public statements, detailed articles explaining the rationale, the inclusion of expert warnings to responsibly manage any overly optimistic expectations, and continuous assurances that core citizen concerns about pensions, wages, and daily living costs are being actively and thoroughly addressed within the transition plan. The central bank's communication has even extended to explicitly addressing the needs of the most vulnerable populations, a clear signal of the reform's ethical grounding and careful planning. This includes ensuring that the elderly, the poor, and public sector workers who rely on consistent, regular payments will not be harmed or disadvantaged by the transition process. This consistent and empathetic style of communication serves to build deep-seated legitimacy, projecting the message that the redenomination is not a speculative experiment but rather a carefully planned, meticulously studied, and ultimately inevitable policy decision. For global financial markets, this level of transparency is read as a powerful signal of institutional confidence, indicating that the CBI is resolute and fully prepared to advance to the next crucial stage of its economic modernization. The precise timing of Iraq's decision to seriously advance the Delete the Zeros project is clearly not a mere coincidence. Significant monetary reforms are never embarked upon in isolation, nor are they typically attempted during periods of political fragility or economic instability. For well over a decade, the Iraqi government has been engaged in a sustained and deliberate effort to lay the necessary structural groundwork for precisely this monumental moment. Now, the convergence of favorable conditions, both within the country and across the global economic landscape, has created the window of opportunity that the financial authorities are seizing upon with conviction and purpose. On the domestic front, the government has achieved considerable progress in stabilizing its political environment and has implemented tighter fiscal management, which includes widely reported crackdowns on systemic corruption. These concentrated efforts have successfully established a degree of governance credibility that is absolutely fundamental to making a sweeping monetary reform feasible and sustainable in the long term. Concurrently, Iraq has benefited immensely from a significant surge in its crucial oil revenues, which has substantially bolstered its foreign currency reserves, creating a robust financial cushion specifically designed to support any bold and necessary economic policy moves, including a potential currency revaluation. Equally important to the domestic preparation has been the comprehensive and ongoing modernization of Iraq's core banking infrastructure. This involves aggressively digitizing transactions and proactively integrating the financial system more closely with international payment networks and regulatory systems. These complex infrastructure upgrades are not mere ancillary projects. They are fundamental prerequisites for ensuring that both a smooth redenomination and a potential revaluation can be executed without any technical disruption. On the global stage, Iraq has also demonstrated a determined commitment to aligning its economic policies with the stringent requirements of key international bodies, such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Trade Organization, WTO, signaling its clear intention to be recognized as an active and reliable participant in the world economy. In summary, the decision to delete the zeros is far from occurring in a vacuum. It is the logical culmination and capstone of many years of gradual yet extremely deliberate economic and structural reform. It serves as Iraq's public declaration to both its own citizens and to the wider international community that we are back. It is a statement that the national currency is no longer a symbol of past instability or rapid devaluation, but rather a robust reflection of the nation's true underlying wealth and its restored economic power. This redenomination is not just a change in accounting. It is a profound declaration of national economic intent for the international community, including investors who currently hold the Iraqi dinar. The potential implications of this forthcoming reform are complex, multifaceted, and potentially deeply profound. The widely discussed dream scenario, often imagined by speculators, is a simple, dramatic revaluation at a dramatically increased rate, while the high number of existing zeros are retained on the banknotes. In this highly speculative case, a 25,000 dinar note could suddenly be worth a significant amount in major foreign currencies, which would indeed represent a life-altering event for those who have waited patiently for years. However, history and policy analysis suggest that the CBI is much more likely to pursue a comprehensive strategy that pairs a strategic revaluation with the practical necessity of redenominatio. Under this more realistic and policy-driven scenario, the zeros are systematically removed from the currency, but the intrinsic value officially assigned to the new, smaller notes is simultaneously elevated to accurately reflect Iraq's substantially strengthened financial and economic position. This means that the 25,000 dinar note might convert into a 25 dinar note, but the exchange rate could be adjusted in such a way that the new, lower denomination note still holds a substantial and meaningful international worth. The core message for any investor is that the physical number printed on a note is significantly less important than the policy-driven, fundamental value that is intentionally assigned to it by the Central Bank of Iraq. Whether the conversion of old to new currency occurs directly or through the mechanism of redenomination, the single decisive factor influencing international perception and asset value will be the official exchange rate that the Iraqi authorities ultimately establish, and the high level of confidence it manages to project to the volatile global markets. This necessity is precisely why the central bank's current level of transparency and its demonstrated policy consistency are so absolutely vital to the process. They are not merely informing the public. They are systematically signaling that the restoration of the dinar's intrinsic value is a real, intentional, and actively underway national project. The clear takeaway for those following the dinar is to focus less on the superficial arithmetic of those zeros and much more on the broader, compelling context of Iraq's comprehensive economic revival and its determined integration with the complex world economy. When government publications and respected media outlets openly highlight the warnings and concerns raised by economic experts regarding the deletion of the zeros, it should not be misinterpreted as a potential red flag or a sign that the authorities are experiencing internal hesitation. On the contrary, the simple fact that these specific warnings are being openly and robustly discussed is a strong signal that Iraq has entered the most practical, technical, and advanced phase of implementation. At this current stage, the core concerns are no longer about whether the reform will ultimately take place, but exclusively about the logistical how to execute it with absolute precision and minimal disruption to the national financial flow and public life. For example, a major focus of these expert warnings relates directly to the critical management of inflation during the potentially vulnerable transition period. If this is not handled with extreme care and rigor, there's a genuine risk that unscrupulous businesses could attempt to exploit any public uncertainty by engaging in opportunistic price gouging. Therefore, the implementation of robust and proactive safeguards is considered absolutely essential to maintain price stability and public trust. Another significant area of focus is ensuring that rural populations, which often lack easy or immediate access to modern banking facilities, can still seamlessly exchange their old banknotes without being unfairly excluded from the formal financial system or disadvantaged in any way. The protection of vulnerable groups, which includes retirees and public sector employees, is also correctly identified as a paramount priority, given their heavy reliance on consistent and uninterrupted pension and salary payments. Simultaneously, the entire national banking sector must be comprehensively equipped and trained to efficiently process both the old and the new currency denominations concurrently for a necessary temporary transition period. It is crucial to understand that none of these detailed challenges represent reasons to delay or cancel the deeply planned reform. They are simply the inevitable, detailed logistical hurdles that arise naturally during the final, complex implementation stage of any large-scale national redenomination process. In fact, the very presence of such detailed, focused, and open discussions among experts indicates a high level of preparedness and institutional seriousness. These experts are not issuing warnings against the core necessity of the reform itself. They are actively advising on the most meticulous and transparent ways to execute it with the minimal possible friction and the maximum cultivation of public trust, which is a powerful signal that Iraq is closer than ever to fully realizing this major change. Beyond the immediate logistics and technical specifications, the decision to remove the zeros from the Iraqi dinar carries an enormous and multifaceted symbolic weight, both domestically within Iraq and on the international financial stage. A national currency that is heavily overloaded with numerous zeros subconsciously communicates a message of underlying weakness, past inflation, and persistent instability to the world. It is a visual cue that the nation issuing the currency has historically struggled to maintain its fundamental value and confidence. Conversely, the deliberate act of removing these zeros and reissuing streamlined notes in simpler, more manageable denominations serves as an incredibly powerful act of national rebranding and economic confidence. For the average Iraqi citizen, this fundamental transformation is expected to foster a renewed sense of national pride and financial dignity. Instead of transacting with banknotes that carry exaggerated and unwieldy values, citizens will soon conduct their daily lives using a streamlined, professional currency that reflects stability and competence rather than a fragile past. For the community of international investors and global partners, this strategic change signals heightened credibility and competence on the part of the Iraqi government. A simplified, rationalized currency structure is inherently easier to use, simpler to price, and far more appealing for foreign businesses that are currently contemplating significant investment or operational expansion within Iraq. The psychological benefits also extend naturally to international trade and tourism. When foreign visitors or business partners no longer have to grapple with confusingly large and cumbersome numerical values, transactions become inherently smoother, clearer, and are conducted with a greater sense of professionalism, significantly boosting the ease of doing business. This is fundamentally important because money is far more than just a simple medium of exchange. It is a nation's most visible calling card, serving as a direct reflection of its economic identity and its national self-image. By meticulously rebranding the dinar, Iraq is effectively communicating a powerful statement to the entire world. We are no longer defined by the instability of our past. We are a strong, resource-rich, and unequivocally forward-looking country, fully prepared to engage globally on completely equal terms. The comprehensive reform is thus about far more than pure economic arithmetic. It is a strategic move about fundamentally reclaiming Iraq's national image, restoring a sense of financial dignity, and proactively broadcasting institutional confidence onto the critical international stage. The overall tone across Iraq's entire financial and political landscape has shifted unmistakably and decisively. For many years, serious discussions about the deletion of the 3 zeros were relegated to the abstract realm of speculation, rumor, or at best, cautious, hopeful optimism. But now, the core issue is no longer a question of if Iraq will undertake this profound reform, but rather a more practical, tactical question of how soon and in precisely what sequence of detailed steps the process will unfold. What is currently unfolding before our eyes is no longer vague possibility. It is a clear, actionable intention being broadcast directly and unequivocally by the Central Bank of Iraq itself, the nation's supreme monetary authority. The very structure and detailed content of the central bank's public messaging clearly demonstrates that the national conversation has conclusively moved from the abstract realm of economic theory into the practical, immediate phase of execution and implementation. Every carefully crafted official statement, every detailed news article, and every piece of expert commentary is now converging on one single, consistent point: the crucial project is active. It is ongoing, and it is demonstrably unfolding right now. The deletion of the zeros is being systematically framed, not as an isolated, standalone measure, but as the final, consequential act in a much broader and deeply strategic monetary reform plan. One fundamentally aimed at restoring comprehensive financial stability, rebuilding international credibility, and fully reclaiming the historical prestige that Iraq once rightfully enjoyed on the world stage. This particular juncture in the nation's history is nothing short of historic. For years, we have diligently tracked every significant policy update, monitored every currency auction result, analyzed every increase in foreign reserves, documented every digital banking rollout, and observed every reform aligned with the standards of the International Monetary Fund. Now, that entire extensive trail of evidence leads unequivocally here to the absolute threshold of revaluation and redenomination. This process is fully in motion, driven by the highest levels of government and monetary policy. The forthcoming days and weeks have the very real potential to define not only the future of the Iraqi dinar but also the trajectory of every financial instrument and investment tied to its ultimate success.